All right, so a common thing you hear from a lot of the anti-Bitcoin crowd is Bitcoin has no value, right? It has no value. And then if you're a gold bug, you'd be like, oh, well, gold is money, and gold can be used for, rings and necklaces, and I think there's a little bit that goes into like phones and stuff too. And it's really just them confessing that they don't understand Bitcoin, because it certainly does have value. Like it's undeniable that it has value, because value is subjective. Value is subjective. And one of the things you'll hear from the traditional finance people is, oh, well, it doesn't have earnings, and it doesn't have, all the stuff that a stock has. But again, that's also confessing you don't understand it, because the people that are buying Bitcoin are not buying it because, oh my God, yeah, it is better earnings than Apple stock, therefore, yeah, that's totally why I'm interested. Like, no. They make up these scenarios and they debunk them. A better way of putting it is they create straw man arguments and they debunk the straw man argument and pretend like they've accomplished something. And my whole argument with this is, I believe that I and the more pro-Bitcoin crowd are correct, because I've yet to come across someone that's bearish on Bitcoin who can very clearly articulate what the most intelligent people in the Bitcoin community would argue as to why they like Bitcoin. Like, I've never seen it. But I see it all the time, where the pro-Bitcoin people, like, they can argue that the use case for real estate and for stocks and even for gold. And the reason that the gold bugs and the real estate people and the traditional, like, the reason that they can't do it is, a lot of them are lazy, and they're to some degree a bit, at least some of them, they're arrogant. They think they know everything. And then there's some people like Peter Schiff that, again, they just don't want to admit they're wrong. And a lot of these people, it's not costing them anything to be wrong. And this is one of the fundamental reasons why I think Bitcoin is going to do very good, is that there's a lot of people out there that it doesn't, like, Peter Schiff is fabulously wealthy. It doesn't matter that he missed the best investment opportunity of his life. It doesn't matter. What's the difference of having a $100 million net worth or a $500 million net worth? Like, at the end of the day, it hardly changes your lifestyle if you're that rich. So it's not really costing him anything. And a lot of these traditional finance people, it's not costing them anything to be wrong. It is. But at the end of the day, it's not really changing their lifestyle. And my point here is that the average person making an average salary, it is costing them something to not own Bitcoin. Like, it certainly is. And this is one of the reasons why I'm so bullish, is that eventually they're going to get their heads out of their you-know-whats and start buying. So this is one of the examples, one of the many examples. Again, I wanted to dive in a little bit deeper here. So Peter Schiff tweeted this out a couple days ago. On October 21st, October 21st, 2021, it took 37 ounces of gold to buy a Bitcoin. Today it's only 29. That's a 22% decline. An official bear market a few days ago, I don't know who that is, said Bitcoin will continue to outperform gold despite the fact that it has underperformed gold for the past 2.5 years. So this is just absolute insanity that people take stuff like this seriously, because this is cherry picking on steroids. And you should know what I mean. If you don't know what I mean, then I don't really know what to tell you. But what I mean by that is October 21st, 2021, that just by pure chance, right? Pure chance, being sarcastic there, was almost exactly where Bitcoin topped out the last cycle. Right? So Peter Schiff is just cherry picking here. You literally cherry pick the last high, and that's the best thing you can come up with? So again, this is my whole point here. These people have to lie and manipulate to try and prove their point. And if they have to do that, they're wrong. Because if they were right, they wouldn't have to cherry pick. Look at this chart here, right? I could easily cherry pick 1980 and be like, hey, gold is down over the last 44 years. Gold is a terrible investment. right? This is gold adjusted for CPI. Or even in the 2010s, it still isn't above. I think that was right after '08, so like 2010, 2011 probably. Gold is down from there. Gold is a terrible investment. Look, if you'd have invested here, you'd be down. You'd have lost money. Right? It's cherry picking. So again, I don't even know what to tell people that actually fall for this garbage. Again, this is not cherry picking here, right? This is the price of gold denominated in Bitcoin. If that's not a downtrend, and again, this is going back over a decade. If that's not a downtrend, I don't know what is. So again, for the gold bugs, you cannot explain this away. And again, I don't think gold is necessarily a terrible investment. I've said for years that I think it probably roughly keeps track with the market. You'll get your 8-10% per year probably. But with inflation running it, I mean, in real terms, what, 5, 6, 7%? Who knows? It's definitely more than 2 or 3 or whatever they're telling us. So again, that's another very important thing to bring up here. Again, getting to my next point here, gold is up 46% in 4 years. Let that sink in. And again, I don't understand this line of thinking. Like, you guys are taking a victory lap because you're up 11.5% per year over the last 4 years. Like, that's your big claim to fame. 11% per year. Now again, they would come back and be like, oh yeah, since October of 2021, Bitcoin's gone nowhere. Like, again, I don't even know what to tell people. Again, 46% in 4 years. Yeah, that's not a bad return. But number one, you're cherry picking a low point in gold. And number two, that's not exactly great. I mean, don't quote me on it, but is the S&P not up more than that? I'm not actually sure, to be honest. But this is the point here, right? This is the point that, again, the fact that you think 46% in 4 years is this crazy good return, like, again, I don't know what to tell you. So again, to kind of summarize things here, Bitcoin is clearly better than gold. And again, they'll come back and say Bitcoin has no value. Again, does this look like it has no value? And again, I'll just debunk that real quick. This whole no value thing, I mean, number one, the actual charts completely disprove that. But again, what do you define as value? And they say, oh, well, gold is money. No, it isn't. Is it legal tender? I mean, Bitcoin is legal tender in more places on earth than gold is, I believe. Don't quote me on it, but I believe. So that's not really the case. If you want to go to a foreign country, or hell, even across state lines in some places, can you bring your $1 million or in gold? No, but you can do it with Bitcoin. Can you pay someone? I mean, pay someone in person, yeah, it's pretty much the same thing, but pay someone across the world? Can the government censor? I mean, the government can't censor either one technically if you're doing it in person, right? So again, I fail to see where the big use case is with gold. They'll say, oh, well, it's an industrial metal. Okay, well, that's true, but that's not the fundamental reason why Peter Schiff owns gold. The fundamental reason he owns it is it's a hedge against inflation and a hedge against the existing monetary system. But again, when they say it has no value, they're confessing that they're lying to you, or they don't know what they're talking about. Because if they weren't lying to you, that they would say, this is what the Bitcoiners would say as to why it has value, and this is why they're wrong. Saying that it has no value just proves, like I said, that they don't know what they're talking about or they're lying. And again, here's why Bitcoin has value for the people that don't know. Bitcoin has value for several reasons. Number one, it is the best hedge against inflation we have ever seen. Possibly there's something else but again, over a decade plus period, we haven't seen anything that even touches it. That's the first reason. The second reason is Bitcoin has no counterparty risk. And the reason I bring this up is This is probably one of the most underrated concerns when it comes to investing that very few people are talking about. Counterparty risk. And again, what do I mean by that? The government can easily censor you when it comes to your stocks. If they want to confiscate your portfolio, they could do it. If they want to confiscate your real estate, they could do it. I don't know if it would fly with gold, but they've done it in the past. Can they confiscate your Bitcoin? No. So again, counterparty risk. Again, you do not want to own, I'm not saying that everything should be, but owning assets that the government can censor is inherently risky. Look at what they've done with Russia and China, and the list goes on. And you say, oh, Russia's so bad. That doesn't matter. What matters is, in the long run, censorship almost never works out. Look at what's going on with SWIFT now, or the BRICS. You decide to censor governments just because they do something you don't like. Whether it's immoral or not frankly, it's irrelevant, because if you piss them off too much, they just give you the middle finger and you lose out in the end. People who think that the U.S. is benefiting by kicking Russia or whatever country you want to name it out of the dollar system, essentially, in the short run, yeah, maybe it helps them a little bit, but in the long run, they're going to find a way around it. They always have, and they always will. So again, that's the first example. The second example, again, look at what they did with the Canadian truckers by censoring their bank accounts. And again, people would come back and say, oh, well, look at they still confiscated some of the Bitcoin. Well, that's because the way they set it up was like the stupidest way. If they were trying to get caught, I don't know what else I would have done. So that's a whole different rabbit hole in and of itself. And again, people are going to say, oh, well, the truckers this, the truckers that. Well, for starters, again, you got, the courts have already ruled that was unconstitutional, right? So that's besides the point, right? So look at real estate. Look at what they're doing with Trump in New York. And again, people, oh, you're getting political. No, that's obvious. It's an obvious witch hunt in that situation. Real estate, there is a list as long as you can think of real estate developers that have done the exact same thing. So again, counterparty risk. I can't stress enough how big of a concern this should be for people. And again, there is zero counterparty risk with Bitcoin. There's no bank that can censor you. There's no government that can confiscate your funds like they can with real estate. Or look at what's going on with squatters in a lot of these places. A lot of the laws are set up to where, you go away for holidays for a week or two, someone notices and catches on and takes up shop, and you need to spend tens of thousands of dollars in lawyers' fees to get him out of your house. Does that exist with Bitcoin? No, it doesn't. So again, you could go example after example, but this is the whole point here. There's no counterparty risk with Bitcoin. Now again, the gold bugs would say the same thing with gold, and to some degree they're true, but it's not the same as with Bitcoin, because you can't transport $1 million worth of gold around with you. You just can't do it. You can transact in a way that can't be censored. That's true, but you can't bring it around with you. You just can't do it. So the last thing I wanted to touch on here is, and again, other reasons as to why Bitcoin has quote unquote value is you can transact with anyone on earth without the ability to be censored. If you don't think that is a valuable thing, I don't even know what to tell you. And again, it is the best form, the best hedge against inflation we have ever seen. And the majority of the world, inflation is a huge concern. So again, how do you not put two and two together there? It boggles my mind. The last thing here, Hut 8 Mining CEO quotes, supply shortages on exchanges are driving the largest banks to reach out about buying Bitcoin. So again, the halving is coming up in a couple weeks, and again, this is just another reason to be bullish. And this is another thing that really separates gold and Bitcoin, and in that gold is not truly finite. I mean, it's hard to mine gold, that's absolutely true, but theoretically, we have massive amounts of gold that still is left to be mined. So, again, yeah, it's finite. You need to do a lot of work to get it, but it's not truly finite. And not only is it not truly finite, Bitcoin is the opposite in that I'm in my 20s, within my lifetime, not only is the amount of gold or the amount of Bitcoin going to be capped, it's going to start going down at some point. So you have increased demand and less of a supply, right? With higher gold prices, that means that there's going to be more production because it's more profitable. So again, gold, it's a better hedge against inflation than most things, but it's not a true hedge against inflation because it's not actually truly finite. Bitcoin is because it is truly finite. And again, a common argument you hear from people is, oh, well, how are the miners going to make money with supply going down? And again, that's just another idea that you don't really know what you're talking about, because that's not, you don't know what you're talking about. Because with Bitcoin, there is the concept of the difficulty adjustment. If that's the case, then the difficulty adjustment, it just goes up. And what happens is the most efficient miners will get more Bitcoin, and the least efficient will get less, and they'll go out of business, or they won't be able to afford it. So the best ones, they're always going to be around because there's a difficulty adjustment. And again, like people, I don't understand why people can't understand this concept. If that was the case, you would still be able to mine Bitcoin on an old laptop. This is the reason why ASICs and all this kind of stuff exists, because over time it's gotten significantly harder to mine Bitcoin. So again, this is the reason why, this is the fundamental reason why I'm so bullish, is that so many people still have not figured this out. Once we get to the point to where 50% of the population actually understands this stuff, then I'll be like, okay, maybe it's time to sell. But until then, I don't see any reason. I really don't. Because eventually, enough people, the old saying, have fun being poor, or staying poor, eventually enough people are going to be tired of being poor. And that's not the best way of putting it, but that's the way we'll put it because it makes sense. Eventually, if people have to choose between, I'm not going to be able to retire, I'm not going to be able to afford a house, or afford a house and buy Bitcoin, afford to retire and buy Bitcoin, which one do you think people are going to choose? If inflation's running at 5, 6, 7%, 8% per year, stocks are keeping track with inflation. Again, I still like stocks, don't get me wrong. I still don't mind gold. I just think it's inferior to Bitcoin. That's why I don't buy it and I don't like it. But again, people have not figured this out. And once people figure this out, it is going to be so bullish it's not even funny. And it's not going to be an overnight thing. It's going to be a slow drip. It's going to be a slow drip. Again, we already have the Fed and the Bank of Canada saying we have to delay rate cuts because inflation is still sticky. It's still hot. It's not as bad as it was, but it's still there. What are they telling you? This is just another endorsement for Bitcoin in my mind. They're being very clear. Inflation is going to continue to be an issue. I mean, look at the governments that are running Canada and the US right now, and I mean much of the world. And again, no need to get political here, but the data is quite obvious. Right? The amount of spending is out of control. The amount of spending under Trump was out of control. But it's gotten even worse. Right? So This is something that I think people should be really concerned about. And again, it just really bothers me that you have, bothers me maybe may not be the right word, but that there's so many people that just lie and mislead people with stuff like this, right? It's just so frustrating. And again, eventually it's going to be too much for people to deny. And this is my fundamental question to the gold bugs. Like, if this chart continues, like how many years, like we're already at 14 years or whatever the number is, how many years of this do we need for you guys to admit you're wrong? If 14 years isn't enough, what is? And this is the craziest thing that these just idiots bring up. It's like they'll call it a bubble. They'll call it, like, again, how many bubbles last over a decade? We're at a decade and a half almost. We're at almost 15, about roughly 15 years. Right? They'll compare it to Tulip Mania. Tulip Mania lasted like 6 months. Again, this is my fundamental question to these guys. And this is another reason that we know they are wrong. What I mean by that is, if they were genuine, right? If they weren't just trying to lie and manipulate us, what would they say? They would say, this is what I think about Bitcoin. This is all the reasons I hate it. Da-da-da-da-da. But if this happens, I'll admit I'm wrong. That's how we know they would be genuine. But they don't do that. You've never heard Peter Schiff. He's probably put out tens of thousands of tweets with something to do with Bitcoin, but he's never once brought something like that up. Why? There's no reason for it. And then they would come back and say, oh, well, what would you take to admit that gold is better? If we get legitimate censorship of Bitcoin, which at this point I don't think it's possible, I'm just making that clear. I don't think it's possible for governments, at least in the West, to censor Bitcoin to the degree that would actually have a significant impact. But I wouldn't rule it out. I'm not going to say 0%. I think it's maybe like a 5% chance. It is possible. That's something that would very much concern me. The other thing would be gold outperforming Bitcoin over like a 10-year period or more. Not like Peter Schiff, like a 2.5-year period, and thinking that you go from literally any other point, virtually any other point, and Bitcoin outperforms. But he cherry picks literally like down to the month, like literally almost down to the month. Like, again, like, come on. If you have to do stuff like that, I don't even know what to tell you. And there's no way that was not intentional. You don't just by chance do that. This was a very clear example of him lying to people. So again, those are a couple things just off the top of my head. If one of those things happens, yeah, I probably would consider gold. But I think that the chances of that both of those things happening are pretty low. So anyway, that's what I wanted to bring up today. This has gone on long enough, so I'm going to leave it there. Please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and stay tuned for more.